My dad risked everything to be with his family. And this is that story. Growing up in São Paulo, Brazil, my dad had always dreamt of traveling the world. When he was in his early 20s, he convinced two buddies of his from church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church, to go on this adventure with him. Packing everything they need in their backpacks, they set off with the little bit of cash they had. They'd rely on the generosity of random folks to get to the next town, then the next city, and the next state. They traveled through Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. After gradually making their way northward through South America, these three amigos, or tres amigos, settled for a little while in Panama. After a year there, my dad was ready to move on, and his two friends decided to stay behind in Panama. So my dad continued northward through Central America on his own. He eventually made his way to Tijuana, the city in northern Mexico just across the border from San Diego. Oddly enough, he ran into some Mormon missionaries who told him about how every morning they'd walk up the beach along the Pacific Ocean, wave at the Border Patrol agent, and stroll right into the US. They arranged for an American citizen to take his belongings for him so he wouldn't look suspicious, and so he strolled right into America. Easy, right? Eventually, he finds his way to Los Angeles, and my dad gets a job working in a factory. Working among Mexican Americans, his Spanish was perfect, but he wasn't learning any English. He decided he needed to immerse himself, to find a community, and to teach himself English. The best place to do that was obviously Salt Lake City, Utah, aka the Mormon Holy Land. Cut to Salt Lake City. He has a job delivering pizza, he's taking English classes, which is where he later meets my mom, which is adorable, I know. At 24, he enlisted at the local high school for troubled teens. Despite having just barely learned English, he graduated at the top of his class and spoke at his high school graduation. 2 years later, my parents get married. Now, keep in mind, my dad is still undocumented, delivering pizzas and attending night school, but undocumented nonetheless. In the midst of all this, my mom gets pregnant with me. Fast forward to the night before I was born. My mom starts having contractions. As my parents are timing these contractions, getting ready to, have a baby, they hear a knock at the door. With no idea who it could be, maybe a neighbor or a friend checking in, they open the door. It was two immigration officers. They'd been tipped off about my parents. Give us your documentation. Without the proper paperwork, the officers were going to detain them right then and there. My mom, the feistiest Latina you will ever know, wasn't having it. True to form, she's like, "We're not doing this right now. I'm pregnant, I'm about to give birth any second, you can't do this." So they were issued a court summons for a week later. In the meantime, I'm born. In court, they were told that they had 30 days to leave or risk being deported. And if they were deported, their odds of ever coming back were slim to none. So they left, back to Brazil. My mom's American visa was still renewable if she were to return to school, so she enlisted in classes and came back to America with me. Meanwhile, my dad is still in Brazil, determined as ever to be reunited with his family. With no job prospects and after having been turned down numerous times for an American visa, my dad decided to make the journey again. This time, it was going to be as fast as possible. He'd been referred to a guy who, for a very steep fee, would be able to get my dad past all of the immigration checkpoints and into the US. The plan was for my dad to board a US-bound bus, and he would be made aware of when to get on and off the bus. He had no choice. He gave the man all the money he had and risked everything. The day comes, my dad is on the bus. While on the way, there was an unexpected checkpoint. They searched the bus, and an immigration officer asked my dad for his documentation. He was caught. He was arrested. He was sent to jail. For days, he obsessed over how to escape. At one point, he actually asked one of the guards, "If I run, will you shoot me?" And the guard was like, "Yeah, for sure." He heard rumors of a few inmates who had managed to escape. Even scarier, he had heard about inmates who had attempted to escape but got caught and were beaten within an inch of their lives. One day they handcuffed my dad along with all the other Brazilian inmates and take them to the Brazilian consulate so that they can be fingerprinted and ID'd so that they'll eventually be sent back to Brazil. In the midst of all this commotion, my dad saw an opportunity. While being let off the bus, they took his handcuffs off. He was outside in the light of day and the gates were still open. And he knew, this is it, it's now or never. So he made a run for it. The fence was closing in and he ran faster. The prison alarm went off. He's just able to slip through and gain a head start into the city. Years before, there had been an earthquake, so he was able to hide among the rubble of homes and abandoned buildings near the prison. He could hear the police sirens as they patrolled the area searching for him. He just kept running, making his way from spot to spot, trying to get farther and farther from all the chaos, running until he was far enough away that he could no longer hear the police chatter or the call of the sirens. With nowhere else to turn, he made his way to a place that could be his last chance, the closest Mormon chapel. No one is there. Eventually, a janitor showed up, and my dad tells him about trying to make it back to his wife and daughter in America, about the guy who was supposed to help him avoid the immigration checkpoints on the bus to the border, about how he was in jail, and suddenly the janitor cuts in. Wait, what did you say? What was that guy's name? Turns out, the janitor knew the mother of the man who scammed my dad. As in the guy my dad gave all his money to avoid the checkpoints on the bus. Apparently this woman attended the church they were standing at, so the janitor took my dad to her house. They get there, she opens the door, and my dad asks her if she's the mother of so-and-so. She takes one look at my dad, sighs, and replies, "What has he done to you?" She was so kind. My dad was able to shower and eat. He even got to call my mom and tell her that he was okay. For context, my mom had no idea where my dad was. She hadn't heard from him since he'd gotten arrested. From the start, she didn't want him making this journey again, but at this point, he was already in too deep. And so the church people there put my dad in touch with the church people in the following neighborhood, and he went on until he was across the border from McAllen, Texas. He'd been told that lots of businessmen cross the border at McAllen every day. All the businessmen did was declare, "I'm an American citizen," and then they walked right in. So the church folks gave my dad a suit and a briefcase for his belongings. They organized for an American citizen to meet my dad on the other side. My dad walked past Border Patrol and declared in the most bogus American accent, "I'm an American citizen." It worked. My dad met the American citizen and they drove to the airport. My mom had purchased my dad an airline ticket, and she knew that if he could just get onto that flight, he'd be in the clear. The McAllen airport, being so close to the border, is filled with immigration agents. So my dad had been advised not to stare at anyone or draw attention to himself, just be normal. He got his boarding pass and headed to his gate. "Just mind your business and read your newspaper," he said to himself. He boarded the plane without a problem, made a transfer at San Antonio, and finally touched down in Salt Lake City. He did it. He made his way back to his family. My mom's entire family was at the airport waiting for him, including baby me. And then they lived happily ever after in America. I'm totally kidding. It would take many years of hard work, sacrifice, and frankly sheer luck before they'd be able to secure green cards. But they went on to raise a big family with 4 kids and enjoy careers in tech and finance. And that's pretty remarkable, that a guy who just walked right into the US with less than $100 to his name, who attended high school in his 20s and worked for years as an undocumented immigrant, paying taxes, by the way, made it. I have friends who can trace their ancestry back to pioneers who crossed the plains, immigrants who entered Ellis Island. And yet, the American dream in my family is only a generation away. I like to think that there are a lot of stories like this still happening today.